The Volari ship, the Veil of Dawn, glided silently through the cold stars. Deep inside, behind locked doors, the last known human, Captain Elias Ward, sat calmly in his cell. Commander Cirith Kale stood outside the transparent barrier, studying him. He looked neither afraid nor angry. He simply sat with his hands folded as if waiting for something. The light above flickered against the old Terran uniform he still wore. Her officers whispered about him when they thought she couldn't hear. Some called him a relic. Others said he was dangerous, but Cirith wasn't sure what to call him. He had no weapons, no army, and no power. Yet his presence filled the room like a quiet storm. "Why do you bow before battle?" Cirith asked one day during questioning. Elias looked up, a faint smile touching his tired face. "It's a sign of respect. To recognize your opponent as worthy before you fight them. It means we face each other as equals." "Equals?" she repeated, almost amused. "You are one man, and I command an entire fleet." "That may be," he said softly. "But before a battle begins, numbers don't matter." "Only will does," Cirith said nothing. She was trained never to show emotion, but something in his words struck her heart in a strange way. Days passed. The Volari scientists studied the human's body, his armor, his language, his history. They discovered that human DNA was complex and adaptive, far more than they had imagined. "Commander," the chief scientist reported, "this being survived in cryostasis longer than any known race could. His cells repaired themselves even in deep freeze." "It's unnatural," Cirith raised an eyebrow. "Or simply human." She ordered the scientist to stop experimenting and to treat Elias as a guest rather than a prisoner. That command surprised everyone on board, but no one dared question her. Elias spent hours on the observation deck watching the stars. He said little, but every time Cirith joined him, he would ask questions about the galaxy. "How many species rule now?" he asked one evening. "Over 100 under the Dominion," Cirith replied. "The Volari maintain order. We keep peace through control." He turned to her. "Control and peace are not the same thing." Cirith frowned. "Peace requires obedience." "True peace," he said quietly, "requires understanding." She looked at him, studying the strange calm in his eyes. They were filled with age and memory, yet still carried light. "Humans were philosophers then?" she asked with a slight smirk. Elias chuckled softly. "No, we were survivors. Sometimes wisdom comes from learning the hard way." One night, alarms suddenly echoed through the ship. The crew rushed to their stations as red lights flashed across the halls. "Commander!" Lieutenant Varon called from the bridge. "We are being scanned by an unidentified vessel." Cirith hurried to the command deck. On the screen appeared a massive ship, black and marked with the sigil of the Dominion's Council. A cold voice came through the communicator. "Commander Kale, report your findings." Cirith straightened. "We have discovered a cryostasis chamber from the old human era. One survivor remains alive." There was a pause. Then the voice replied, "Eliminate the specimen immediately. The Dominion forbids the revival of extinct war species." Cirith's heart tightened. She glanced toward the lower decks where Elias was held. "With respect, Counselor, this being holds historical and strategic knowledge. I request, no requests. The Dominion remembers the human wars, and they were chaos made flesh. Destroy it, Commander." "That is an order." The signal cut. The bridge fell silent. Varon looked uneasy. "Commander, orders are clear." "Yes," Cirith said quietly. Clear as ice, but her voice didn't sound like it used to, calm and certain. It carried doubt now. She went to Elias's cell. He stood as she entered. "Something's wrong," he said, reading her expression instantly. "You have sharp instincts," she replied. He smiled faintly. "It's how we stayed alive." Cirith folded her arms. "My superiors want you terminated." He didn't react with fear or anger. He only nodded as if it were expected. "I see. The galaxy still fears what it doesn't understand." "You don't seem surprised," she said. "After all this time," Elias said softly, "fear hasn't changed, but neither has courage." Cirith stared at him for a long moment. "Why do you not resist? You're not even trying to escape." "Escape?" he said quietly. "Commander, I woke up in a future where my home is gone. My people are dust and the stars have forgotten our name. What would I escape to? The only thing left for me is to remember." She wanted to say something, but no words came. She turned and left, her heart strangely heavy. Later, she found herself in the ship's data archives. She accessed what little was known about the humans. There were recordings, old battle footage, voices speaking in languages half forgotten, images of blue skies and oceans of Earth. She saw people laughing, fighting, building cities, standing together against impossible odds. They fought extinction not with technology but with spirit, she realized. One file caught her attention. Operation Dawnfire. It showed Captain Elias Ward himself, standing before a small unit of human soldiers. He spoke to them before their final mission. Even if the stars burn and the worlds fall, remember, our strength is not in our weapons but in our will to keep going. Cirith watched in silence, her chest tightening. She understood then why he bowed before battle. It wasn't submission, it was respect, a promise of honor to his enemy and to himself. The next morning, Cirith entered his cell again, but this time she deactivated the shield. "You're free to move about the ship," she said, "but stay within the observation decks. My crew doesn't trust you." Elias nodded. "Then I'll earn their trust." He kept his word. When a plasma leak broke out in the lower deck, he ran into the danger zone before anyone else, sealing the ruptured pipe manually. His quick action saved 3 crew members. Later, one of the soldiers whispered, "That human saved my life." The story spread quickly through the ship. Slowly, fear turned into curiosity and curiosity into respect. Cirith watched all this quietly. She had never seen her crew treat an outsider like one of their own. One evening, as the ship drifted through the ruins of another dead world, Elias asked to see the stars from the bridge. Cirith agreed. He stood before the vast screen, the endless galaxy shining before him. "So much has changed," he said softly. "And yet, not really. The stars are still beautiful." Cirith joined him. "You speak of them as if they were alive." He smiled. "To humans, the stars were always like old friends, silent, distant, but always there when we looked up." She glanced at him. "You talk as if you miss them." "I miss what they stood for," he replied. "Hope. No matter how dark things got, we believed there was always light somewhere out there." Cirith looked at the stars and for the first time felt that same sense of wonder. That peace did not last long. The Dominion ship returned, larger this time. A message came through, harsh and final. "Commander Kyle, you have failed to comply. Stand down or face removal." Cirith's crew looked at her in fear. She stood tall. "Prepare to jump," she ordered. "Commander, that's defying direct command." Farron warned. "Yes," she said calmly, "but I refuse to destroy a living being for the sake of fear." Elias stepped forward. "You'll be hunted for this." "I know," she said. "But I've seen what you are, Elias Ward, and I won't let another legend die because of blind obedience." He looked at her, respect shining in his eyes. "Then, Commander, you have earned something rare among humans." "What is that?" she asked. "Our trust." The Valari ship turned sharply and vanished into the dark. Behind them, the Dominion fleet began pursuit. As the stars stretched into streaks of light, Elias stood beside Cirith. "Where will we go?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Somewhere no one looks anymore." And in that moment, Cirith realized that she had crossed a line she could never return from. She had believed only in facts and commands her whole life, but now she believed in something else. She believed in the human who bowed before battle. And in that belief, the legend of humanity lived once more. The Valari ship, the Veil of Dawn, moved silently through the endless dark. The stars looked peaceful, but inside the ship there was no peace. Commander Cirith Kale had broken the Dominion's direct command. Her decision to save the human, Captain Elias Ward, had turned her from a loyal officer into a hunted one. Every channel of the Dominion's network now carried her name. Commander Cirith Kale, traitor to the Dominion, but Cirith felt no regret. The moment she saw the Dominion's cruelty, their fear of one unarmed human, she realized that her people's so-called order was only control dressed as peace. She had made her choice. Now she would live with it. "Commander," Lieutenant Varon said, standing by the main console, "the Dominion fleet is tracking us. They're 3 jumps behind. We can't keep running forever." Cirith nodded slowly. "I know." Elias was standing nearby watching the data streams. His calmness was strange, almost comforting. "You could have left me on that planet," he said quietly. "You didn't have to do this." Cirith turned toward him. "I could have," she admitted. "But something told me that would have been the real failure." Elias gave a faint smile. Then you understand what humanity once stood for. She frowned slightly. You talk about your people as if they were gods. No, Elias said softly. We were far from perfect. We made mistakes. But when we fought, it wasn't for control, it was for choice. Those words stayed with Cyrith long after he walked away. Hours later, alarms blared through the corridors again. The Dominion had caught their signal. 2 cruisers approaching from hyperspace. Varen shouted. We can't outrun them this time. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, Cyrith ordered. All power to shields! The ship trembled as enemy fire struck the hull. Sparks flew, lights flickered, and the sound of metal groaning echoed through the decks. Cyrith gripped the console. Return fire! Energy beams streaked across the black sky, lighting it like a storm. But the Dominion ships were stronger and larger. The Veil of Dawn shuddered again as a missile hit its side. Elias rushed to the weapons console. Let me help. Varen looked uncertain. You're not trained on Valari systems, Elias smiled. Then show me fast. Before Varen could argue, Elias's hands were already moving across the screen. His eyes scanned the targeting data, understanding it in seconds. Your ships rely too much on auto-lock. Disable it. Let me aim manually. Manually? That's impossible, Varen protested. Not for a human, Elias said calmly. Cyrith hesitated for a heartbeat and then nodded. Do it. Within moments, Elias took control of the targeting systems. The Dominion ships fired again, but this time he responded faster, firing 2 precise bursts straight into their engines. One enemy cruiser spun out of control, its lights dying. Varen stared in shock. How did you? Elias didn't look away from the screen. Instinct. Sometimes you have to feel the rhythm of the fight, not just see it. Cyrith's respect for him deepened. There was something raw and powerful in the way he fought. Not like a soldier following orders, but like a warrior listening to his heart. After hours of battle, they finally escaped into a quiet region of space. The damage was heavy. The crew worked to repair the ship while Cyrith and Elias stood on the observation deck. You saved us, she said softly. Elias shook his head. You saved yourselves. I just reminded you what courage looks like. Cyrith looked out at the broken stars. I used to believe the Dominion's ways were the only way to keep order, but now, I'm not sure what peace even means anymore. Elias turned toward her. Peace isn't the absence of war, Commander. It's the presence of understanding. The Dominion doesn't want peace, they want silence. Cyrith stayed quiet for a moment. And what did humans want? Elias smiled sadly. A chance to be better than yesterday. That night, Cyrith couldn't sleep. She went to the ship's training room, where she often practiced her combat routines to clear her mind. But when she entered, she found Elias there, practicing with a wooden staff he had built from spare parts. He moved with calm precision, each swing and step perfectly balanced. His motions were slow, controlled, almost like a dance. You fight like an artist, she said. He turned, breathing lightly. Every movement tells a story. Would you like to learn? Cyrith hesitated, then nodded. He handed her another staff. First rule, he said. Respect the space between you and your opponent. That's where truth lives. They began to spar. His strikes were quick, but never cruel. Each time she thought she could predict him, he changed direction. Fluid and unpredictable. After a while, she asked between breaths, You could have defeated me easily. Why hold back? Because this isn't about victory, he said softly. It's about balance. She stopped, lowering her staff. You talk like a teacher. Elias smiled faintly. Once I was. Before the last war, days turned into weeks. The ship drifted farther into unknown space, hiding among forgotten asteroids. During that time, the crew began to change. They laughed more. They spoke freely. The fear that once filled their eyes slowly faded. The human's presence had done something no commander ever had. He had reminded them what hope felt like. Still, the Dominion's shadow never left them. Every transmission carried the same message. Surrender or be destroyed. Cyrith gathered the crew. We can't keep running. Sooner or later they'll find us, Elias stepped forward. Then we don't run. We stand. Against the Dominion, Varen said, shocked. They'll crush us. Elias looked around at the frightened faces. Maybe, but they'll never forget us. And every story starts with someone who refuses to bow to fear. Cyrith looked at him, then at her crew. She saw something new in their eyes. A spark of belief. She nodded. Then we make our stand." Together they prepared. Elias shared his old Terran tactics, unpredictable, daring, and creative. He taught the Valari soldiers to use instinct, not just data. He said, "When your enemy knows every rule, the only way to win is to break the pattern." The crew trained hard. They learned to move like shadows, to strike fast and think freely. Cirith watched them transform from obedient soldiers into true warriors. And as she watched, she realized that Elias wasn't just teaching them how to fight. He was teaching them how to live. The Dominion arrived sooner than expected. A massive fleet appeared on the horizon, blocking every escape route. The largest ship broadcast a message directly to Cirith's bridge. "Commander Kyle, you have one chance. Surrender the human or all of you will be destroyed." Cirith looked at Elias. He stood silent, his face calm. "You could still hand me over," he said softly. "It would save your crew," she met his eyes. "No. If I do that, then everything I've learned from you means nothing." He smiled gently. "Then it's time." Elias turned to face the crew. "Before battle," he said, "humans had a tradition. We bowed, not out of weakness but out of respect. It reminded us that we fight not to destroy but to protect what we love." He looked at Cirith, then bowed deeply. "To you, Commander, for standing for what is right." Cirith hesitated, then did something no Valari commander had ever done before. She bowed in return. Around them the crew followed one by one, until every Valari on the deck stood with their heads bowed to the last human. The Dominion ships closed in. Cirith's voice rang across the bridge. "All stations, prepare for battle." Elias took the co-pilot seat beside her. "Let's show them what humanity meant." The veil of dawn roared into motion. Lasers flashed, engines screamed, and space filled with light. Outnumbered and outgunned, the small Valari ship fought like a creature alive. Every move Elias suggested seemed impossible, but it worked. His unpredictability confused the Dominion's AI-controlled ships. "Target their formation gaps," he shouted. "Never meet strength head-on, cut its rhythm." One by one, Dominion ships faltered. Cirith's crew fought with courage she had never seen before. In that moment, she understood. The strength of humans was not in their weapons or their numbers. It was in their will. When the battle finally ended, space was quiet again. The Dominion fleet had pulled back, leaving wreckage behind. The Veil of Dawn was damaged but still flying. Cirith looked at Elias. "We survived." He smiled, eyes tired but bright. "For now," she nodded slowly. "You said once that humans fight for choice. Today I finally understand." Elias looked out the window at the fading stars. Then maybe the legend was worth believing after all. The dark void of space was quiet, filled with cold stars that glittered like silent witnesses to what was coming. Commander Cirith Kyle stood on the command deck of her flagship, the Valari Dominant, staring at the blue-gray planet below. That was the world where the last human, Captain Elias Ward, had awakened. Around her, the hum of power engines and the soft chime of control panels created a calm rhythm. Yet her mind was not calm. She could feel the weight of the new orders pressing against her chest. The Valari High Council had sent a direct command: eliminate all traces of the Terran relic, destroy the planet and every record connected to it. Cirith had obeyed countless orders before. She had fought in wars, crushed rebellions, and conquered systems for the Dominion. But never before had her heart felt so uncertain. Her second-in-command, Lieutenant Naravel, turned to her. "Commander, preparations for orbital strike are complete. Your authorization is required." Cirith did not answer immediately. She looked once more at the planet's surface, remembering the quiet ruins and the strange human who had bowed before their duel. Elias Ward, his calm voice, his unwavering eyes, and his strange gesture of respect, lingered in her thoughts like an echo. "Lieutenant," she said softly, "what do you think of the human?" Nara blinked, surprised by the question. "A relic, Commander. Dangerous but obsolete. We should follow orders." "Obsolete," Cirith repeated, almost whispering. "Tell me, Nara, did he seem obsolete when he faced us with nothing but his will?" Nara hesitated. "No, Commander. He seemed different, strong." Cirith turned away from the viewing window. Her voice grew firm. "Different, yes. And that difference frightens the Council." The ship's communicator beeped. A hologram appeared, a senior official from the Dominion High Council, his face sharp and expressionless. "Commander Kyle," the hologram said, You have delayed the execution of your orders. Why? I am confirming target stability, she replied quickly, though her tone was tight. Confirm faster, the official said coldly. The existence of a Terran survivor is unacceptable. Humans brought chaos to the stars. They must remain in legend only. Destroy him, Commander. That is your duty. The hologram vanished. Silence filled the command deck once again. Cirith closed her eyes for a brief moment. She knew what duty demanded, but something inside her whispered that duty was not always right. Far below, deep within the frozen mountains, Elias Ward stood outside an ancient Terran bunker. His old starfighter, the Resolute, was finally repaired. It was a small craft scarred by centuries of dust and decay, yet still alive with power. He checked the flight systems one last time. Old girl, he murmured to the ship, you ready to dance again? The lights flickered in response, almost as if the craft understood him. From behind him, a faint sound echoed, the clicking steps of Cirith's scouts. Elias knew she had not yet given the final strike order. He could feel her hesitation, though he didn't know why. He looked up at the cold sky. Guess they're giving me time, he said quietly. Time to finish this my way. He climbed into the cockpit, strapped himself in, and powered up the engines. The sound roared across the empty plains like thunder waking the dead. The Resolute lifted off, leaving trails of dust and fire behind. In orbit, alarms flashed across Cirith's control screens. Commander, a small vessel is launching from the planet's surface, shouted a technician. Identification unknown. Cirith didn't need the data. She already knew who it was. It's him, she said. Should we intercept? Nara asked. No, Cirith replied after a long pause. Let him come. Moments later, the communications channel opened. Elias's voice came through, steady and calm. Commander Kale, I know what your council ordered. I can't let you carry it out. Cirith stared at the speaker, her hands tightening behind her back. You think you can stop an entire fleet alone? I don't need to stop you, Elias said. I only need to remind you who we were. His voice was filled with quiet fire. No hate, only conviction. Cirith's bridge crew looked at each other nervously. None of them had ever heard such tone from a single being before. Human, she said, lowering her voice. Why fight for a dead world? Because the world isn't what matters, Elias replied. It's the promise that lived here. The promise that even in darkness someone will stand up and fight for what's right. For a long moment the bridge was silent. Then Cirith spoke. Her words heavy with emotion she couldn't hide. You know this battle will end your life. Maybe, Elias said, and she could almost hear him smile. But some things are worth the end. And then without another word he closed the channel. The fleet moved into attack formation. 100 Valari warships surrounded the small human craft. Commander, orders? Nara asked. Cirith hesitated, then whispered, Hold position. The crew obeyed, confused but silent. Elias's ship accelerated forward. It darted between enemy formations like a streak of silver lightning. Plasma beams and missile trails filled the void, but the small human ship moved like a dancer, unpredictable and wild. Impossible, one pilot gasped. He's outmaneuvering us. On the main display, Cirith watched as Elias flew directly into a squadron, firing in short, precise bursts. Each shot struck a weak point, disabling ships instead of destroying them. He wasn't killing, he was choosing mercy. That's human strategy, Cirith whispered. They fight with instinct, not logic. The fleet adjusted, surrounding him again. Dozens of lasers converged on his ship. The Resolute shuddered, flames bursting from its wings, but Elias didn't slow down. He activated his final weapon, a pulse bomb of ancient Terran design. It would disable electronic systems for minutes, long enough to stop the strike. He transmitted one last message to Cirith. Don't let them forget that we lived with honor. The pulse detonated. A blinding wave of white light spread across the fleet. Every system flickered, engines failed, shields dropped, and silence filled the comms. For a moment, there was nothing but stillness. When systems came back online, Cirith saw his ship drifting, half destroyed, glowing faintly in the reflection of the nearby sun. Commander, Nara whispered. He's still alive. Cirith ordered a rescue team immediately. Bring him aboard. Minutes later, the human warrior was carried into the medical bay, weak but breathing. His armor was cracked, his eyes half open. When he saw Cirith, he smiled faintly. You didn't fire, he said softly. Cirith knelt beside him. You gave me a reason not to. Elias tried to laugh, but his breath caught. Then maybe. Legends can still teach the living. He looked at her, and with the last of his strength, he raised his hand in a small gesture, the human salute of respect. Then his arm fell slowly, his eyes closing with peace. Cirith stood there silently, her throat tight. Around her the crew watched without words. The silence was not from fear, it was from awe. She reached out, touched the Earth emblem on his armor and whispered, I believe. Later, when the fleet reported back to the Council, Cirith gave a simple message. The Terran relic has been neutralized. The planet remains unstable, unsuitable for colonization. She ended the transmission and looked out the window at the stars. Nara approached quietly. Commander, what now? Cirith touched the insignia she had taken from Elias's armor, a small blue and white patch with the symbol of Earth. She pinned it on her uniform. Now, she said, we remember. Outside, the stars burned brighter than before, as if honoring a promise made long ago. The human warrior was gone, but his spirit, his courage, his heart, had changed something deep within the Volari. For the first time in her life, Cirith Kale felt what the old legends truly meant. Not about power, not about war, but about honor, faith, and the strength to stand alone when the galaxy demands you kneel. And as the fleet turned away from the planet, Cirith whispered one last time into the quiet void, Rest well, human warrior. The stars remember your name. The galaxy felt quieter after the battle. The Dominion fleet had retreated, leaving the Volari ship, the Veil of Dawn, drifting through the black stars. Commander Cirith Kale stood on the observation deck, staring at the void. Even after all she had seen, her thoughts were heavy. She had watched the last human, Captain Elias Ward, fight alone against impossible odds. She had seen courage and honor, strength and wisdom, all wrapped into one man who had been considered a legend. Now he was gone, yet somehow it didn't feel like the end. The crew moved quietly through the corridors. They repaired damaged panels and systems, their hands steady but their hearts still awed. Every time someone passed the medbay, they paused at the empty bed where Elias had been carried after the battle. Even Lieutenant Nara Vel, who had always obeyed the Dominion without question, stopped and stared. He wasn't just a soldier, she whispered to herself. He was something more. Cirith listened from the bridge, her fingers resting lightly on the console. She thought about his words, his calm voice, and the way he had bowed before battle, not out of fear but out of respect. That gesture, so simple yet powerful, had changed something in her. For the first time, she truly understood why the legends had survived for centuries. In the weeks that followed, Cirith ordered that the Terran planet remain untouched. She refused to follow the Dominion's demand to erase its history. Instead, she instructed her crew to study the ruins carefully, not as a threat but as a memory. Elias's influence had already begun to shape them. Soldiers moved with a new sense of purpose. Engineers repaired the old Terran machinery, discovering records of a civilization that had once stretched across the stars. Every discovery reminded the crew of the human warrior who had taught them courage, creativity, and willpower. Even Cirith felt the change in herself. She had been trained to follow orders without question, to value control above all else. But now she realized that true strength came from choice, from standing for what was right even when the galaxy demanded obedience. One evening, Cirith returned to the medbay alone this time. She stood before the empty bed, her hands clasped behind her back. She spoke softly as if the human could hear her. You were right, Elias Ward. Legends are not just stories. They live in the hearts of those who remember. A small insignia caught her eye, a blue and white patch shaped like Earth's emblem. She picked it up and pinned it to her own uniform. From that day forward, Cirith wore it proudly. It became more than a symbol of humanity. It was a reminder of courage, honor, and the power of standing against impossible odds. The galaxy, however, was not yet done testing her. The Dominion sent another message, a warning stronger than before. Commander Kyle, your disobedience is unacceptable. Surrender or face elimination. Cirith read it silently, then smiled faintly. You will learn, she said, that some lessons cannot be erased. She turned to her crew. We are no longer just a fleet of soldiers, she said. We are the keepers of a promise. Humanity has lived again through us, and we will honor that memory." The crew cheered softly, not for war, but for hope. Months later, stories of the human warrior began to spread quietly through the Dominion territories. Sailors, traders, and explorers whispered of a man who had faced an entire fleet alone. They spoke of a commander who had refused to obey orders that were wrong. And they spoke of the Valari who had learned to respect courage, honor, and freedom. Some called it a myth. Some called it impossible. But in secret, everyone remembered the lessons. Courage can overcome numbers. Honor matters more than victory. Even one individual can change the course of history. And at the center of those whispers was a simple truth. Elias Ward had lived, and his spirit still moved the stars. Cirith returned to the observation deck often, watching planets pass in silence. She imagined Elias traveling the void, standing alone but unbroken, a warrior whose presence still reminded her and her crew of what it meant to fight with purpose. One day, a young cadet approached her. "Commander," he said quietly, "why do we honor a human who is gone?" Cirith looked at him, calm and resolute. "Because he taught us to remember something the galaxy has forgotten. Legends aren't just stories. They are choices we make, courage we carry, and hope we never abandon. That is why he still lives, in every one of us who remembers him." The cadet nodded, understanding more than words could explain. Years later, Cirith's own story became legend. Valari soldiers spoke of the commander who refused to destroy a single world for fear of a forgotten race. They told stories of the human warrior who bowed before battle, not as submission, but as respect, and how that gesture had changed the course of history. Across the galaxy, new explorers found the same Terran ruins and discovered records of Elias Ward. And though the Dominion sought to erase them, the truth remained. Humans had once lived. Humans had once fought, and even if only one remained, their will and courage were immortal. Cirith herself wore the Earth Patch until her last day, teaching every crew member who served under her that courage could not be commanded, it had to be chosen. And on the darkest nights, when the stars were quiet, she whispered into the void, "Rest well, Elias Ward. Your legend lives, and so do we." Time moved on. New fleets explored distant systems. New civilizations rose and fell. But in every corner of the galaxy where freedom and courage mattered, the story of the human warrior and the commander who believed in him persisted. Children grew up hearing the tale of the human who faced a fleet alone. Young soldiers trained with the lessons he left behind: strategy, instinct, and the honor of fighting for something greater than oneself. Even centuries later, when the Valari themselves had forgotten the names of their rulers, one story remained unchanged. A human warrior bowed before battle. A commander chose conscience over orders. And a legend once thought lost lived on. Cirith Kale, now older and revered, walked through the halls of a rebuilt starbase. Her eyes fell on a small plaque at the center, an emblem of Earth. Beside it, written in both Valari and Terran languages, were 3 words: "Courage remembers always." She smiled faintly, remembering the quiet warrior who had taught her, and all of them, what it meant to truly fight for what mattered. Somewhere in the stars, the echo of Elias Ward remained, carried not by ships or armies, but by the hearts of those who believed in honor, courage, and the power of one. And in that belief, the legend of humanity was alive once more. The stars above Alora shimmered like living jewels, each one reflecting in the crystal spires of the great city of Seravan. The air glowed faintly with soft blue light from the energy veins running through the streets. Everything here was clean, quiet, and peaceful. Too peaceful for someone like Lyra Vex, who longed to see more than her perfect world. Lyra was a young xenobiologist from the Seren Dominion, a peaceful alliance of species known for their advanced technology and strict control over chaos. For centuries, the Seren had kept their borders safe and their citizens calm. They believed peace was the highest form of civilization, and they believed one other thing, a story told since childhood. The humans of ancient Earth were gentle, emotional creatures who had vanished long ago. They were said to be kind-hearted dreamers, curious explorers who could not handle the harshness of the galaxy. Lyra had read every record, every hollow about them. To her, humans were beautiful myths like bright candles that burned too quickly. But myths never satisfied Lyra's heart. She wanted truth. That was why she joined the exploration vessel Aetheris, traveling beyond Serene space to study derelict ruins and lost colonies. It was her chance to see the galaxy for herself, beyond the walls of theory and comfort. The mission was quiet for months, cataloging dead worlds, scanning forgotten debris. Then, one day the ship's sensors picked up something strange near the edge of the Vorn expanse, a dark region filled with drifting wrecks and gravitational storms. "Captain, there's something out there," Lyra said, her golden eyes wide as she read the data. "It's human design, very old. Maybe from the early Terran age." The bridge fell silent. Even the hum of the engine seemed to pause. The captain, an older being with translucent skin named Adrex, turned slowly. "Human, that is impossible. No human vessel has been recorded for 3,000 years. Lyra nodded, unable to hide her excitement. "That's why we must investigate." Hours later, the Aetheris entered the dark region. Broken satellites drifted like ghosts, and the remains of forgotten ships floated among the stars. Then, out of the mist, a metallic shape appeared. A massive, rusted ship, its hull marked with the faded letters, UES Horizon. The crew gasped. "United Earth ship?" someone whispered. "It's real." Lyra pressed her hand to the observation glass. It survived all this time. For her, it was like touching history itself, a living dream. When the boarding team entered the ancient vessel, silence greeted them. The air was thin, the lights long dead. Dust floated through the air like memories. Lyra moved carefully through the corridors, her recorder scanning every detail. She found signs of battle, burn marks, bullet holes, metal warped by fire. The humans had fought here, but against what? As they reached the command deck, Lyra's scanner beeped softly. "There's something alive?" she whispered, surprised. Adrex frowned. "Impossible. Nothing could survive 3 millennia of drift." They followed the signal to the cryogenic chamber. Inside stood a tall metal cylinder covered in frost. The readout blinked faintly. "Stasis pod active." Lyra's heart raced. She brushed her fingers across the cold glass. Inside, through the ice, she saw the faint outline of a figure. A man.
His hair was dark, his face calm, yet something about his expression was
unyielding. Even in sleep, he looked like someone who had seen storms and refused to bow to them. "By the stars," Lyra whispered. "It's a human." The rest of the crew stared in disbelief. Adrex shook his head. "That pod is ancient. If he wakes, his mind may not survive. Leave him in stasis until we can analyze," but Lyra wasn't listening. She had already connected her scanner to the pod system. The data confirmed what she felt in her heart. It was still viable. A real living human. Back on the Aetheris, they secured the pod in the medbay. The other scientists watched from behind the glass as Lyra worked. She spoke softly, almost reverently. "All records said humans were peaceful explorers," she said, adjusting the controls. "They believed in kindness and cooperation. But their world, Earth, was called a death world, wasn't it? A place full of storms, beasts, and dangers. How could gentle beings come from such a place?" The medbot beside her responded in its monotone voice. "Historical data inconsistent. Human behavior exhibited both cooperation and aggression." Lyra smiled faintly. "I like the first part better." She checked the vitals again. The human's body was strong, muscular, even after centuries of frozen sleep. His bones were dense, his pulse slow but steady. The readings fascinated her. Every part of him screamed survival. "Strange," she murmured. "He looks like a warrior, not a scholar." When the captain entered the medbay, Lyra looked up eagerly. "We have to wake him. His body is stable." Adrex hesitated. "Lyra, this being comes from a forgotten age. We know nothing of his mind, his customs, or his power. Proceed carefully." Lyra nodded, but her curiosity burned brighter than caution. When the stasis pod finally hissed open, cold mist spilled into the air. The temperature dropped sharply. Lyra stepped closer, her heart hammering. The man inside gasped, his eyes snapping open. For a moment he seemed disoriented, then focused. His gaze locked on Lyra. Those eyes, sharp, blue, and filled with something primal, made her take a small step back. The human sat up slowly, breathing deeply. His movements were controlled, deliberate. His gaze swept across the room, noting every exit, every control panel, every face watching him. Lyra spoke gently. "You're safe. You're on the vessel Aetheris under the Seren Dominion. I'm Lyra Vex, a xenobiologist. He didn't reply immediately. His voice, when it came, was deep and steady. Dominion? Never heard of it. What year is it? Lyra hesitated. It's the 47th galactic cycle. Approximately 3,000 years since your ship disappeared. The man blinked once, absorbing the truth. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly. So, everyone I knew is gone, he said quietly. Lyra's chest tightened. She didn't know how to comfort him. I'm sorry, he nodded, a distant sadness flickering behind his composure. Then he straightened, his soldier's posture returning. Name's Elias Ward, Captain, UES Horizon. Lyra smiled nervously. Captain Ward, it's an honor. He gave a short nod, then looked around again. Your ship's structure is light. Not meant for heavy combat, is it? The captain, watching through the glass, frowned. He knows our ship class already. Lyra blinked, surprised. You can tell that just by looking. Elias's expression was calm but serious. I've fought enough battles to know a ship that can't take one. There was no arrogance in his tone, only observation. Yet his presence filled the room like quiet thunder. Lyra studied him closely. Every movement, every glance carried purpose. He didn't fidget or hesitate. He reminded her of the ocean before a storm, still, but powerful beneath the surface. Later, in the observation deck, Lyra stared at the stars while recording her notes. Captain Elias Ward shows physical and mental stability far beyond expectation, she said softly into her recorder. Despite his long isolation, he is alert and highly adaptive. His reactions are calm, not fearful. His perception and awareness suggest intense survival training. There is something different about him. Something almost dangerous, yet not cruel. She paused. Maybe the stories were wrong. Maybe humans weren't just gentle. They were strong because they had to be. Outside the glass, she could see Elias standing alone, gazing at the stars he hadn't seen in 3,000 years. His reflection looked almost ghostly against the void. She wondered what kind of world could create someone like him. And for the first time in her life, Lyra felt something she couldn't explain. Curiosity mixed with awe, and a little fear. Because deep down she could sense it. This man was not from a gentle world. He was from a place that tried to kill him every day. And somehow he had survived.